Chapter 6, Proteins and Amino Acids. So the book talks a bit about the importance of proteins, that they're essential to every cellular function. They're involved in chemical reactions in the body, they're components of skeletal and muscular tissue, and they're very vital to our immune response. Humans have cultivated and ingest adequate amounts of protein, and it's essential for human survival. We find proteins in plants and animals, but in Western culture, we get most of our protein from animal products. And as affluence increases in non-Western societies, they developed our Western habits, which include increasing the amount of beef in their diets, placing greater demands on agriculture to provide grain for cattle, which will convert it to the preferred type of protein, beef protein. Today, agriculture production is facing a challenge from biofuels. In the United States, more and more green crops are being grown not as food, but as biofuel. One can say that it's inefficient to feed grain to cattle for them to consume it as beef protein, but this process is part of the cycle of nutrition. Corn that is converted into ethanol for fuel for an automobile doesn't feed anyone, but it does fuel cars. What we do know is that obtaining enough protein and maintaining adequate balance of plant and animal protein for the world's population is clearly of primary importance. So let's talk about what proteins are. Proteins are a macronutrient like carbohydrates and fats. It's a class of nutrients that includes molecules made up of intertwining chains of amino acids. Like fats and protein, it contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But what differentiates proteins from fats and carbohydrates is it also contains nitrogen. Proteins, like I discussed a bit, are essential in all biological processes, and they are large, complex molecules found in the cells of living things. This discusses as well, it facilitates many of the body's functions. We cannot survive for a long period of time without protein. So let's talk first about proteins in our food, about the types of foods that provide the most concentrated sources of proteins, and nutrients and plant sources of proteins versus those of animal sources of protein. So here's a picture showing animal proteins. We typically think of meats when we think of protein, or scrambled eggs, or a glass of milk. These animal foods here provide the most concentrated sources of protein in our diets. Here we see meats, beef, poultry, pork, and fish, and 1 cup of milk provides 8 grams of protein, 1 egg 7 grams, and 3 ounces of meat over 20 grams of protein. Animal sources of protein provide other things as well. They also provide B vitamins and readily absorbable sources of minerals such as iron, zinc, and calcium. They're low in fiber. However, they're often high in saturated fat and cholesterol, a nutrient mix that we know increases the risk of heart disease. When we talk about plant sources of protein, we're looking at some grains, nuts, almonds, walnuts, pecans, cashews, pistachios, etc. Legumes. Legumes are the starchy seed of the plant that produces beans, so typically referring to beans or bean pods. It includes peas, peanuts, beans, soybeans, and lentils. And what we find as far as plant sources of protein is you can see in this picture a half a cup of legumes can give you 6 to 10 grams of protein. A slice of bread gives you a little bit, 2 grams of protein. A quarter cup of nuts or seeds gives you 5 to 10 grams of protein. And a half a cup of rice, pasta, or cereal, though we think carbohydrates when we think that, does give you a little bit amount of protein. Plant sources of protein provide B vitamins, except for B12, and supply iron, zinc, and calcium, but often those minerals are in less absorbable forms than they are from the animal products. But the positives are plants are generally excellent sources of fiber, phytochemicals, and unsaturated fats. We know those are the good fats, and all of these are dietary substances that promote health. So let's talk a little bit about the structure of amino acids and proteins. So amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. This is a picture of an amino acid. They contain, like I said, carbon, hydrogen, an acid group, and an amino group. The amino group is the one that contains the nitrogen, and a side chain. There are hundreds of proteins known, but only about 20 amino acids commonly occur naturally. What you really need to know is 9 are essential. Essential means the body cannot make them, and we have to get them from the diet. And 11 are non-essential, meaning the body can make them by using nitrogen from essential amino acids and pieces of carbohydrates and fat. And so on the right-hand side, it lists the essential amino acids and non-essential. You don't have to memorize those, but it's important to understand the difference between essential and non-essential amino acids. Some amino acids are referred to as conditionally essential. That means when a non-essential amino acid becomes essential under certain circumstances. For example, the body uses phenylalanine, which is essential to make tyrosine, which is non-essential. But if the diet fails to provide phenylalanine, or the person has a disease known as phenylketonuria, which is commonly referred to as PKU, it's a genetic disease, then tyrosine becomes conditionally essential. People who rely and consume a lot of protein and amino acid substances instead of whole protein from foods very often can experience deficiencies in certain amino acids. So what is this a picture of? Probably the warning on this can of Diet soda doesn't mean much to you unless you have the genetic disease PKU or phenylketonuria. Individuals with PKU must limit their intake of the amino acid phenylalanine, and usually this means limiting their consumption of high protein foods. So when a scientist or a person with PKU looks at this label, they would recognize that the artificial sweetener aspartame in this soda is the source of the phenylalanine, and the breakdown of aspartame in the digestive tract releases phenylalanine, which cannot be metabolized with individuals with PKU. So if they consume large amounts of this amino acid, compounds called phenylketones build up in their blood. And in infants and young children, phenylketones interfere with brain development, and in pregnant women they can cause birth defects in the baby. So to prevent these effects, individuals with PKU must consume a diet that provides just enough phenylalanine to meet the body's needs, but not so much that the phenylketones build up in their blood, because it can cause some some severe brain injuries. Structure of proteins, a peptide bond is a chemical bond formed when the amino group of one amino acid binds with the acid group to another to create a peptide. So just like in lipids and carbohydrates, we have dipeptides or 2 amino acids, tripeptides or 3 amino acids, oligopeptides are 4 to 9 amino acids, and polypeptide chains are 10 plus more of amino acids joined together. The shape of protein, you're going to hear this a lot, is essential to its function. The elongated shape of the protein collagen gives strength to tendons and ligaments. The spherical shape of the protein hemoglobin contributes to the proper functioning of red blood cells, and the linear shape of the protein in muscles allows the muscles to change shape during contraction. This is a picture of an amino acid chain, and here you can see the peptide bond. Amino acids form to polypeptides, and then that longer chain is a folded polypeptide chain. It forms a 3-dimensional shape, and finally the protein consists of lots of folded polypeptide chains together, and that's what builds up and gives it its function. Denaturation. Protein denaturation is the alteration of the protein's 3-dimensional structure. It can happen by agitation. So when you whip egg whites, you're breaking, denaturing the proteins in the egg whites when they're whipped. When you heat, hardening of the egg when it's cooked, you can see it goes from a liquid to a solid, and you're denaturing the protein. Acid and base conditions, so stomach, milk curdles when it's in the stomach, and acidosis or alkalosis, high or low pH in the blood. Heavy metals, lead, mercury, gold, alcohol, detergents. So what happens is proteins uncoil, and after this occurs, the protein no longer functions as it naturally did before. So here you can see the protein was folded in the raw egg. It was liquid and had a certain structure and function, and then we cooked it and we denatured it, and it has a totally different structure and function. The next section we'll move to protein digestion and absorption.